Hello, here's May. Today I show my process of drawing 6 ensemble stars characters with weather-themed outfits. This is part 2 to last week's video where I talked about 6 characters for snow and rain as weather, and this week I'll do it similarly but different from last week will be that for fully screen recorded time-lapse I will have them play for a bit longer with just some background music. I also share a thing I learned and paid attention to as advice for each time-lapse. Let's begin. We start with some sun-inspired outfits and characters. Whenever I'm drawing lineups, what I really like is drawing different poses and then sorting them to the characters, figuring out which character would match which pose. And for these 3 outfits, I had short pants and a t-shirt since in summer it would be warm, so it made sense that the outfit would be suited for warm weather. I had Arashi in the middle where the t-shirt tucked into the pants, while for Hiro and Mao they were not. And for the shirts I at first had only one sunflower plant for them as pattern, but then I added others too. I overall went with a warm color scheme similar to the sun character I designed once. I also included black socks. At first I thought I'd make them white, but overall there was no white anywhere else in the outfits, so I made them black. And also, while drawing the full illustrations, I always looked back at this lineup to figure out where the sunflower print would be on the t-shirts. Since it was a bit different for all 3 characters, I could have also made sure the print would be the same, but since I started out with one sunflower for each one at a different spot, it would be difficult to make sure it looks balanced. The tip I'll share for this illustration is one I realized because I now have 2 screens, one where I draw on and one where I have my references. Before that I just had one tablet I would draw on. The tip is about the overview window. I have this in Krita, but this is also in other drawing programs where you just have the full illustration zoomed out, and you can look at this whenever you zoomed in to make sure that when you're drawing zoomed in that either you're not putting in too many details where you don't really need, you're not spending a long time on drawing details when it's not really seen, but also that the illustration overall works. I have my overview window on my second screen, so I can always work zoomed in on my drawing tablet while seeing the whole illustration on the second monitor. This helps a lot. Now we move on to the 2 time lapses from sun-themed characters. On the left we have Hiro from the unit Alkaloid. I was figuring out his body pose for some time. In the reference image I had, hand pose was already there, but I wanted to figure out how it could work for the whole body. I added rings and earrings to make the hand not look as boring, and I also had put in heart-shaped pupils just because I felt like it. And the tip for this illustration would be that you can make small changes to your art, like me changing up the pupil, and you don't have to worry about it not looking like your art anymore. Even with bigger changes, overall people can mostly tell that it's your art just because no matter how you decide to change it, some elements will remain similar since you're going off the same knowledge base. Even when you're learning new things, you put them on top of the things you already learned and had in your own art. I also have a additional tip because I had the hand in the illustration. When I exported the images, I made the neck darker than the hand to help it be separated. So in general, it's important that it is clear in which order the objects in your illustration are in by separating them with a change of value and maybe also color. And on the right side, you can see Mao from the unit Trickstar. For him I tried many poses for the arm, and I kind of ran into the problem of trying too many hand poses and too many variations in general, and I sometimes can get caught up in this. My tip here would be that it's good to find a right balance with variations, having a few but not too many. It's good to try experimenting a bit to get a better pose and an overall better image. This applies for colors and lighting as well, but if you spend too much time on this it can get overwhelming. Trying out too many things in one image could then lead to you not learning as much or improving as much as you would if you would just move on to a new piece. And now for the third sun-themed character, which was Arashi from the unit Knights. Since her face was facing forward. I use lots of symmetrical lines, especially for the eyes as guides. I at first wanted to include a second hand, but then decided not to. And the left hand is grabbing onto the pant straps. And for the frontal perspective, I talked about this in last week's video already, but I struggle with if I should make it completely symmetrical or not for illustrations like these. In general, when you draw face angles, you have the front and the three-quarter and the side view, but there are so many angles in between. It can be difficult to figure out how the face shape would look. For example, when you have a slight turn, it means that one eye will be a bit smaller than the other, and also that it will be angled differently most of the time as well, but really figuring this out in detail, how it should look, is something I struggle with a lot. But my tip here for drawing faces would be that they don't always have to be symmetrical. For front-facing faces, but also in different directions. What I mean by that is that, especially for the eyes, I noticed that many artists I like can have the eye that's facing away a bit more open than the one that's closer to the viewer in a three-quarter view. For the necklace, I used a brush and changed the spacing of it, which was also a tip I mentioned some time ago in a video about Krita tips. For the shading, I tried including this triangular light on one side, which is known as Rembrandt light, I think. This was also the case for Mao before, but overall the skin looks too reddish to me. Something about the colors doesn't work that well for me. Now let's move on to the wind-themed characters and outfits. I wanted to include lots of windy patterns, and the overall color scheme here was black and white with some purple. They all had short black t-shirts with these purple side parts, and while drawing I noticed that this was a bit confusing since the jacket on top had similar ends. You can see this when you look at Wataru. On one side of the t-shirt the purple part is covered by this jacket, but on the other side not. I also wanted them to wear gloves and white pants, since white pants is something I connect with wind and a flowy feeling. I also at first was thinking about making the pants be differently sized for each of them, one tight and one wider, and you can see that they in general are wearing the outfit a bit differently. This is also the tip I have for group illustrations in general. If you have multiple characters wear the same outfit, or want their outfits to be the same but also a bit unique, you can make some small adjustments. It could be the outfit pieces themselves, how they are cut, their color, or adding unique accessoires like gloves, glasses, necklaces. Or you could also just have them wear the outfit differently. For example, you have one side of the jacket falling off the shoulder, or one character is wearing a jacket and the other one has it in the hand, and so on. I will also show all the previous weather designs here, and you can see how I applied this for the different outfits. Now we move on to the wind-themed time-lapses. First for Wataru from the unit Fine. Since he has long hair and the illustration was wind-themed, it was very important for me to determine the wind direction right in the beginning, so I could draw some nice flowy hair. I find his nose looks a bit weird since it was from the front, but also very small. I wanted there to be a nice contrast between pink and purple. I was also questioning how intense the lighting layers should be. And overall, what I like about the illustrations for the series are how the hands turned out most of the time. I drew nails in as well, since they are more close up. Before I would mostly draw no nails. I had a few of these light reflections on Wataru. I imagined that would be there from the trees around him. And my tip for his illustration would be for drawing hair. You can separate your hair into sections. What I like to do is to separate them into 3 sections. You have the bangs in the front, then the middle or the side hair, finally the back hair. And it's good to pay attention to the volume of the hair compared to the head. Then for Kaoru from the unit Undead, I wasn't sure about his pose at first, if his body should be bent forward or to the back. I had a lot of problems with his head and hair size, and what I realized often happens for me is that the face is too big at first and the hair is too small, and especially since for Kaoru it was a pose from above, the hair and the overall head should be a bit bigger, while the lower part of the face, meaning the jaw, should be smaller. Also in general, having the hair outline not be perfectly round but also not too edgy is something I struggled with here. And my tip for his illustration is about hair, just like Wataru's, and here it is to balance sharp shapes with rounded ones. And finally, let's move on to Natsumi from the unit Switch. Just like with Kaoru, the angle here was from above, and at first I also wanted to have his face facing upwards, but then I went with a slightly downwards angle. I enjoyed working on his hair a lot and having it be a bit flowy. I had a variation with the hand and without the hand, which was something I had for lots of these illustrations. And as I mentioned for Mao before, I was overwhelmed by the options for the lighting here in general. I had multiple versions, and because of this, when exporting for Instagram posts, I wasn't sure which one I liked most and would share as like the first image. The tip I have from Natsumi is also about variations. This is just to figure out the approach you want to take when you draw. You can either be clear right from the start what lighting you want to go for, or like me, for these illustrations, play around. I knew the direction of the light, but the intensity of it or the colors were unclear sometimes. Choosing from different options was nice to learn more about colors and shading and what looks better to me, but it was also a bit stressful and time consuming. For this I tried to include lighting only on the forehead. It looked weird in the end to me. The skin got too pinkish and reddish, and I wanted there to be a pinkish light, but it just looked weird overall. I already drew some very pinkish skin in a illustration before for Softober, and there it kind of worked, but here it didn't for me. Or I just preferred the versions without this pinkish skin. After finishing all the illustrations, what I like to do after a while is to sometimes correct things I would make different if it's not too time consuming. This also helps me to see how my own taste, what I find looks good, has developed over time. The thing I changed up for them were the eyes. The ones I didn't change were the ones that were my favorites last week, which were Ibara, Aichi and Mayoi. Overall, making the eyes a bit more detailed and transition into the rest of the face to not have them look flat was what I focused on. And finally, similar to last week, here's how I would rank the illustrations. And I also put up a second version where I rank all the illustrations together. I hope you enjoyed watching, and goodbye.